My son called me a failure at his own dinner table, and nobody stopped him. My name is Walter Combs. I'm 68 years old. I spent 31 years fixing evac systems in the Ohio heat and the Ohio cold, climbing into attics that could kill a younger man, running lines through crawl spaces no one else wanted to touch, so my son Derek could go to college and become something more than me. He did. He became a regional sales director with a big house in Maple Ridge, and a leased German car parked out front like a trophy. That night, I drove 2 hours to celebrate his birthday. I brought a card with $300 inside, money I had saved slowly, the way I saved everything, one careful dollar at a time, skipping small things so I'd have something to give when it mattered. Derek opened the card at the table, in front of his wife Michelle, and his 2 kids, and he laughed. Not a happy laugh. A short, sharp laugh, like something had finally snapped loose inside him. $300, Dad, that's it. He looked around the table like he wanted witnesses. You know what I make in $300 an hour, sometimes. I told him it was what I could give. That's the problem, he said. It's always what you could give, never what you actually did. You worked a nothing job for 30 years and you're still counting change like it matters. You're a failure, Dad. I love you, but you are. My granddaughter Ellie, only 9 years old, stared down at her plate and went very still, the way children go still when they sense something breaking that they can't fix. Michelle touched Derek's arm and whispered his name, trying to pull him back from wherever he had gone. He didn't stop. I built something, he said. You just survived. I sat there for a long moment, my hands, cracked and calloused from 3 decades of copper pipe and refrigerant lines, rested on that borrowed dining table like they didn't belong to me anymore, like they were relics from a life nobody in that room respected. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I folded the napkin in my lap, set it down beside my untouched plate, and I said the only thing I had left. Thank you for the birthday dinner, son. Then I drove 2 hours home in the dark, alone, with the radio off, my son's words riding beside me, the whole way, louder than any music could have been. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, the way I always had. I made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table, and looked around the small house I had lived in for 40 years. The same house Derek had once called cozy during his divorce, and small every single time since. As if the walls themselves had shrunk to match his opinion of me. I made a decision that morning, a quiet one. No shouting, no slammed doors, nothing anyone would notice from the outside. I called a man named Richard Ilston, someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 20 years. A man from a chapter of my life my son knew nothing about. A chapter one had buried on purpose, for reasons that were about to matter more than they ever had. Richard, I said, when he finally picked up, it's Walter. I think it's time we finished what we started. By noon, I had packed 2 suitcases. By evening, I was gone. Derek had no idea what he had just set in motion. Richard Ilston picked me up from the bus station in Cedar Falls, Iowa, 2 states away from everyone who thought they knew me. He looked older, grayer, but his handshake was the same as it was 20 years ago, back when we were young engineers with a garage full of half-built prototypes, and a dream neither of us could afford to chase. You actually came, he said. I told you I would. Eventually. Here's what Derek never knew. Before I spent 31 years fixing furnaces, I spent 4 years designing them. Richard and I built a small heating efficiency patent together in our 20s. A valve system that cut energy waste in residential units. We had almost nothing. No investors. No money for lawyers. So we filed what we could. Shook hands on a 50-50 split. And then life happened. My wife got sick. Medical bills piled up faster than any patent could pay out. I took the steady job, the one with a paycheck every 2 weeks, and I told Richard the first couldn't wait around for royalties that might never come. He kept going without me. I never asked what happened to our patent after that. I was too busy, surviving, exactly the word Derek used against me. Turns out, surviving was smarter than anyone gave me credit for. Richard had spent 2 decades slowly building that valve system into something real. 3 years ago, a major manufacturer licensed it. It was already in 500,000 furnaces across the country, and because I never signed away my original share, because Richard was too honest a man to cut me out even when he easily could have, my portion had been sitting untouched in an account, waiting. How much? I asked him, sitting in his kitchen that first night. He slid a folder across the table. I stared at the number for a long time. It was more money than Derek's entire house was worth, more than his car, his bonuses, everything he had ever bragged about at that dinner table combined. I didn't feel joy. I felt something quieter, something closer to peace. For 2 weeks, I stayed in Cedar Falls, sorting out paperwork, meeting lawyers, becoming someone I hadn't been in decades. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed constantly. Derek, calling. Derek, texting. Derek, Panicking. Dad, where are you? Your neighbor said your car's gone. Call me back. I didn't answer. Not out of cruelty. Out of necessity. I needed to know who I was becoming before I let him back into the story. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, Richard's assistant walked in holding her phone, her face pale. "Walter," she said, "you need to see this. It's about your son's company." I took the phone from her hands. The headline made my stomach drop. Derek's company was under investigation for fraud, and his name was listed as one of the executives involved. Fraud. The word sat on that screen like a verdict. I read the article twice. Derek's company, Holloway Sterling Group, was under federal investigation for inflating sales numbers to secure investor funding. Derek's name was listed as a regional director who had signed off on falsified reports. He wasn't the mastermind, but he had signed the papers. He had looked away because looking away kept the bonuses coming. I felt no satisfaction, only a tired, aching sadness. I called him that night for the first time in 2 weeks. He picked up on the first ring, his voice cracking. Dad, I don't know what's happening. They're saying I falsified things I didn't even fully understand. Michelle took the kids to her sister's. I might lose the house. I might lose everything. I know, I said quietly. I saw. Where have you been? I've been calling for 2 weeks. I told him the truth. All of it. Richard. The patent. The valve system in 500,000 furnaces. The money that had been waiting for me for years while I quietly fixed other people's furnaces, instead of collecting royalties on my own invention. Silence on the line. A long, heavy silence. "You built something too," he finally said, his voice small. "You built something real, and I called you a failure." "You did," I said, "and it hurt more than you'll ever know." "Dad, I'm so sorry. I was chasing something that wasn't even real. The numbers, the title, the car. None of it was mine. I borrowed all of it, and now it's being taken back." I drove back to Ohio the next morning. I didn't bail him out with money, not at first. Instead, I sat with him through the worst of it, the lawyers, the depositions, the nights he couldn't sleep. He cooperated fully with investigators, told the truth about what he knew, and because he hadn't created the fraud, only failed to question it, he kept his freedom, though he lost his job and his title. 6 months later, I helped him start over, not with a handout, but with a real offer. Richard and I were licensing the valve patent to smaller manufacturers now, building an honest, modest company. I asked Derek to join us, starting at the bottom, learning the business the way I once had, with his hands, not just his mouth. He took it. The first time I watched him kneel down and actually study a furnace unit, sleeves rolled up, asking real questions instead of performing confidence, I saw something in him I hadn't seen in years. Humility. At Ellie's 10th birthday, months later, Derek stood up during dinner. He didn't make a toast about numbers or success. "My dad spent 30 years surviving so I could have a life," he said, looking at me. "I called that failure. I was wrong. Survival built everything I ever had. I just didn't know how to see it. I didn't need an apology to feel whole again. But I received one anyway, and it healed something I didn't know was still broken." 1 year later, I stood in the parking lot of a small building, with a new sign above the door, Combs and Ilston Efficiency Systems. My name first. Richard insisted on that. Said I'd earned it 20 years ago and never collected. Derek ran daily operations now, not because I handed it to him, but because he'd spent a year proving he could. He started on the shop floor, hands black with grease, learning every valve, every seal, every mistake I used to make when I was young and broke and hungry, to build something that mattered. He didn't complain once, not when the hours were long, not when older workers doubted the boss' son. He earned every bit of respect he got, slowly, the way respect is supposed to be earned. Michelle and the kids moved back in with him 3 months after the investigation closed. She told me once, quietly, over coffee, that she'd never seen Derek listen to anyone the way he listened to me now. Not out of fear, out of finally understanding. Ellie was the one who surprised me most. She started asking questions about the business, about how things worked, about what patent even meant. I found myself explaining copper pipe and pressure valves to a 10-year-old who listened harder than most adults ever had. She told me she wanted to be an engineer, like Grandpa and Mr. Richard. I didn't correct her when she called it our company. On a quiet Sunday that spring, Derek asked me to come by the house for dinner. No occasion, no birthday, no card required. We sat at his table, the same one where he'd once called me a failure in front of his children. This time, he didn't talk about titles or bonuses or what he'd built. He asked me about the early days, about Richard, about the wife I'd lost too young and the years I spent grinding through furnace repairs so he could have opportunities I never did. I used to think providing and building were different things, he said. You did both. I just never noticed, because you never made noise about it. I told him the truth, that I wasn't angry anymore, that the money from the patent had never mattered as much as this moment did. Him asking real questions, wanting to understand instead of judge. Before I left that night, Ellie hugged me at the door and whispered, "Grandpa, thank you for not giving up on us." I drove home slower than usual that night, windows down, letting the spring air in. I used to believe my life's work was measured in furnaces fixed and bills paid on time. I was wrong. My life's work was standing in that doorway, watching my son finally see me, watching my granddaughter dream about circuits and valves instead of titles and cars. Some men build fortunes. I built patience. And in the end, patience outlasted everything Derek thought he had. That, I've learned, is the only inheritance that never runs out.